I'm sure you might have heard of the word archetypes before, but how do you really integrate your archetype? In this video, you'll find out some tools on how you can apply that right away.
Yeah. I'm inspired. I'm inspired.
Hey there guys, how's it going? My name is Sumit Chatterjee from the Flow Zone Academy, and I'm a flow state coach, which means that I help you feel better and perform better. I'm out here today speaking to you guys about archetypes, okay? Now I'm dressed in my own particular archetype, and this is kind of the epitomization of if I were to play a cartoon character, what would be like my one costume that would keep being reproduced again and again and again in each episode, right? So I want you to think about this. I want you to have one item piece, okay, one clothing item that you know is the representative of you, so you can just step into it whenever you decide, okay, this is me, this is what I'm going to step into every time I have a big event, every time I have something going on. And it's a really nice way to have an anchor for you, a clothing anchor for you, that you know, okay, this is who I am epitomized. Now, when we're speaking about archetypes, we have to start out talking about Carl Jung and what he meant by archetypes. So archetypes are patterns in the unconscious, specifically the collective consciousness, okay? Now, he split it up into three ways. There's consciousness, our personal unconscious, and the collective unconscious. And all these three symbiotically, they feed off of each other, right? They bleed into each other, they melt into each other, they blend, and they each play a role, play a part in affecting the other one. Okay, so for instance, your personal unconscious is the things that you have in your own experience, in your unique individual experience. You have different things that you store in the background of your mind. Okay, this is all subliminal, right? Below the threshold of the conscious mind. Oftentimes there are things that are maybe too distressing to face, or things that are insignificant that we store back up there. Now, the collective unconscious are elements that all humans share universally. And in terms of the archetypes, they're predisposed. So they're inherited before birth. They're symbols that we'll see throughout time, right? Time and time again, through myths, through stories, through poetry, through images that show up countless times in people's dreams. This is what starts to determine the archetype. Now, Jung specifically defined 12 archetypes, okay? And I'm going to show you a list of all of them right here. Now, I specifically am most attuned to the outlaw, okay? The guy who doesn't follow the rules, kind of goes by his own code and starts to create his own pathway, okay? And I think that it's very powerful for me to admit this because, again, knowing your archetype, or at least the one that you resonate with the most, really starts to open you up to new possibilities, right? Because you also know what your strengths are, but then you also know what your flaws are, right? The thing about the outlaws, they don't trust people too easily, right? Vulnerability is actually an issue for them. So it's really awesome when you can finally figure it out. Individualist.org has an incredible archetype quiz you can take to figure out what your archetype is. However, that's just scratching the surface, right? In this writing reality course, we're just actually going to break down how you can pinpoint your archetype and get much more closer to your own unconscious truth of really pulling from that unconscious realm into the conscious realm to be able to create the life that you want. Now, the thing that's holding you back is your amygdala. It's your fear. That's why I tell people, okay, I'm getting people from a fear state of mind to a flow state of mind, a fear-based society to a flow-based society. That is my mission. Now, why do I say this? Because the amygdala actually holds us back from our potential. What do I mean by this? You see, our brains have a homeostasis. It has an equilibrium. So whenever we get out of our comfort zone and we feel a little bit uncomfortable, it goes back to that baseline. It just swings back. And the more you try to fight your fears and you're trying to be like, I won't be afraid, I don't need to be afraid, it's like a Chinese finger trap, right? It doesn't actually allow you to evolve to the level that you can, because again, you're going to keep swinging back to the baseline, swinging back to the baseline. Now, when you have the techniques, the tools to actually fight against your amygdala, to do the inner work, to do the healing. When you come out of the other side, you start to really produce an incredible result. What is one of the ways that you can bypass the amygdala and make it relax a little bit so you can get the results that you want? Imagery. Imagery, imagery, imagery. If you hold one image in your mind, it's going to be so mythopoetic, so powerful that it will bypass the amygdala because it cannot think in any way when it has the relaxation of the dharana, which is in Sanskrit, it is that single pointed consciousness. When you have concentration, you can bypass that reptilian part of the brain, the limbic system, and you can start to understand, okay, the image that I'm focusing on right now, that is all I'm conscious of. That's where I'm gaining and regaining and optimizing my flow state. So if you're watching a certain show each day, or even if you're just looking at a specific image in your desktop background, I know I have that image in the back, right? That's my wallpaper. Now, why specifically? Well, that's what I want my reality to be, in a sense, and it will. It's just not yet, right? There must be a time and place for this thing. So again, it's really about creating the images. So I don't believe in vision boards, okay? I've told many of my clients this, people know this. I used to have a vision board. I still love vision boards, but I think you should have a vision room. What do I mean by this? Everywhere you look, there are unconscious symbols that is redefining your archetype. Keeping on just amplifying your archetype, right? Putting a stamp on your archetype and telling you this is who you are, this is who you are, this is who you are. And constantly barricading your subconscious mind to be able to actually get you to the level of that optimization. Now, in Lion's Den today, we had the honor of speaking with Rex Sykes. He is one of the OGs of the NLP game. He's the guy who influenced Tony Robbins and a lot of these other guys, Speed Seduction and all these different NLP backgrounds. He is one of the guys who really is one of the pioneers of this game, okay? And he did it in a very particular way. Now, as he was talking with AZD, I started to recognize how much overlap he was saying and what AZD was saying and what my process is as well. So I was like, yes, I have confirmation now that I'm on the right path with this video, with this channel, with TPM and what I'm doing, my theatroplasticity method, and actually learning from theater and learning from the theater arts and bring it to the real world, right? Because he mentioned that a lot of his old school work, he would start acting when he was very young, right? And he would start to imagine that he was Harry Houdini and all these different things. Obviously, I'm not going to give you too much of the golden insights if you're not a part of this elite tribe of people, but I will say that it is so optimal that you optimize your character, your archetype in a way where you're truly living and embodying them. So one practice that I highly recommend is I want you to think of one character that you really want to embody. And it can be an archetype, but I want you to just think of that character and what that they convey. So if it's Pablo Picasso, that means your archetype is one of the artists, okay? Now I want you to study Picasso. I want you to study his mannerisms, study what he did, study his life, study his paintings, go really deep, go in depth, and start to just pull from that source and find kernels that you can pull from and blend with your authenticity. That's the truth. You have to find kernels from these characters, almost like a symbiote, right? That attaches to you, and you start to incorporate these different things, right? Like what Rex said is he imagined himself wearing Harry Houdini's head and then his jacket and his body, right? So you're wearing them, essentially. You're wearing them like a cloak, you're wearing them like a helmet, and you're stepping in, you're embodying that character, okay? You're feeling it through your bones, through your muscles, right? And you're acting as is and acting as if you are them. Carl Jung says that our archetypes are ingrained in our psychic constitutions. I love that when he said that, right? Essentially, they are so clear that in many different cultures we have these different images, and he loved to also pull from many different esoteric texts and things like that, and ancient texts, and alchemy and hermetic teachings and things like that too. So I think he was actually a very mystic man, Jung was a very mystic man, and he really wanted to dive into the unconscious very much so by going into the right side of the brain and really learning from it, right? And interpreting his dreams and having these visions that he saw, right? And from the encounters of, even schizophrenic patients, we would see that there are repeated archetypes again and again and again and again, right? It's actually bizarre how even in very psychedelic trips, people have similar occurrences of seeing aliens or seeing, the mother ayahuasca, or these images, right? These tropes that are combining all the unconscious material. So this is very, very deep stuff, right? Once you explore the archetypes, it's not just one thing like, oh, cool, I'm a painter now. So when you were studying the example that I gave of Picasso, I want you to now embody and think of how you would see the world through Picasso's eyes. Now, this is very, very powerful stuff, okay? So if you can actually pierce through his eyes and see the world through his eyes, I want you to now interview yourself as a third person asking you, Picasso, so what's your name? My name is Pablo Picasso. Okay. I want you to actually embody, do the accent, do everything. Just actually embody and embrace what he's doing. Okay. Next question. How do you believe that the world will change? I believe that the world will change when we make it change and we change our perception. When we change our perception, we can change the physical world, because it's all art. When I see this, I interact with the world in a very specific way. I want to see and encounter the depth and the breadth of every single painting, not just from one single brushstroke, but the entirety of what makes it, and knowing when to stop. That is what makes the artwork pop. Okay, I just completely improvised that, right? But this is what it takes. This is what it takes, that improvisation, that spontaneity of like being able to boom, go into this character, boom, go into that character. Now, I had this skill set when I was very young because I used to imitate voices. I used to actually get into trouble for this a lot, right? Like my teachers, like we used to have a teacher named Mr. Harrison. Mr. Harrison, if you're listening to this, I'm so sorry. But essentially, we used to make fun of like different teachers and things like that. Hey there, guys. My name is Mr. Harrison, and that was his voice. Like that was straight up his voice. And we used to just he used to teach us science, right, in middle school. And man, like I used to just love making fun of these voices because I thought that it was hilarious. I thought that I could incorporate these different voices. It wasn't so much as a mocking or a mimicry. It was more like I wanted to incorporate these funny characters that I had in my mind and the cartoons and the comics that I used to read and be able to actually act through and live through them and understand their perspective. And when I changed the voice, when I changed the tonality, when I changed my body language, when I changed every single thing, the cadence, right? The engagement, how I'm moving through the world, right? The different catchphrases I'm using. All of this stuff is coming back to the archetype, okay? So if you have a very powerful archetype, guess what? You have these specific sound bites and dialogue that you use, different terminologies in the way that you answer people, right? So let's say your world is of art. Let's say that is your archetype, your image. You are the artist. Guess what? What kind of art do you like to paint, right? You have to figure those elements out too, right? I'm really inspired by nature. Excellent. Make a mental bookmark of that. Now, the next time that people actually interview you or ask you questions, guess what? You're going to come back to these majestic elements that incorporate and make you who you are and your brand and what you embody in this world. So let's say that they tell you, okay, what inspires you about looking towards the past? Well, if you think about the past, all that was there at first was not human beings but nature. nature was there first. So we must pay respect to what came before us. And that is where I get my inspiration. Not from the past in terms of history, but the origin point of what makes a flower bloom from a seed. You see what I'm saying and doing here, guys? I'm talking about nature, but I'm doing it in such an artistic, poetic way that it matches the archetype of the artist. Now, some people may say, oh, that's pretentious. Why are you going into this ramble? That's not my audience. You see what I'm saying? But the people who resonated with that, they're my audience. So you have to play to your audience. You have to know who your audience is. Who is the extra in your movie, right? Who is the audience of your role that you're playing? You're not going to play to every single person on the planet. Of course not. Now, of course, technically you are doing that when you get to a certain status and reach, that you are impacting lots of people at once because you have created a character for yourself that resonates with so many people. Just like how Tony Robbins, he mentions on his interview that I created this guy. I created this Tony Robbins guy so I can reach the masses. He's actually admitted to having that persona, which is actually a conformity archetype, right? Which is actually set to be a mask, right? Now, it's okay to play masks as long as you know your authenticity. Now, I don't think Tony Robbins is having a mask on, absolutely not. But I think his mask is melded with his authentic face too, so he can actually be able to kind of get into this energy mode where he's all about, you know, boosting state and pumping state rather than the state already being okay and being within and being fine as you are. Right? But I think that state change, that NLP, as I was talking about, as Rex Sykes also mentions, the NLP, the hypnosis. I've actually started doing Rex Sykes' hypnosis. It's called Attitude Activator. And essentially, I just started it this morning. I felt very tripped out. It's a very incredible experience, actually. I don't know if I fell asleep near the end, but it was very, very powerful. And the different elements, it's like different voices. There's a woman's voice in there too. Ooh, right? And it's very engaging and very interesting. It keeps you feeling good and it keeps generating the state. So I believe in these techniques, or I believe that we can actually program our subconscious mind. And you've heard it so many times before. Program your subconscious mind. Power of the subconscious mind. But what are you actually doing to do that? Right? What are the action steps that you're doing each and every day, every single day? What you're doing is you're building your character. You know, one of my clients told me the other day, I'm getting inked up. I said, no, you're not getting inked up. You're building your character, right? You know who you are, brother, if you're watching this, right? Essentially, every single day, what are we doing? We're building our character as the Flow Jedi, and explained it in my last Instagram post. If you go and check it out, I speak about what the Flow Jedi's definition actually is. And I gave an incredible passage from the Tao Te Ching that I want you to look at, okay? Having said that, I hope you have an incredible day. That's it. Integrate your archetype. If you have any more questions on this, if you want to get on Writing Reality, shoot me a message. Have an incredible day. May the flow be with you and stay legendary. Let's get it. Boom.